Hi, Us. Thanks for joining me. Us, Mike. I don't know what Florida's like. Is it heading into a bit of a lockdown? I know there's lots of craziness about the election, but I haven't really been watching that too closely. Us, Rochelle, good to see you. And Frank, Us, Torbjörn, good to see everyone. Boy, oh boy, I've been really busy, and it's pretty exciting. The book, I'm happy to say. Yeah, the beard. I haven't had a chance. I haven't been allowed to grow a beard for 30 years because of my work. Won't allow me to grow a beard. So I just thought I'd grow one for fun, and all of a sudden it's white. So you're right, Mike. It'll come off sooner or later. Marco, Us, Rob, good to see you. Us, Daniel. Daniel, I'm heading down to Wollongong soon too. As soon as the lockdown will allow me to get through Sydney Airport without having to quarantine, I'll be heading down to Wollongong. So I'll just let you know. The boys will probably get in touch with you anyway and let you know. But that'll be a lot of fun. So anyway, here we are. I've been doing long days, sometimes 22-hour days, just to get everything ready. And I'm really happy to say that the book is in the hands of the printer. So there's no more changes or anything like that. We finally found a printer. We lost our printer in Korea with the lockdown. It was a real problem because we'd negotiated some really good things. And they just got hammered. They couldn't get their supplies or anything. I don't even know. I must admit, I don't even know if they're still alive. And South Australia is locking down now, so that could affect everything. But anyway, found a new printer, negotiated, and I paid the 50% deposit yesterday. Begged, borrowed, and well, I didn't steal anything, but I almost would have had to. But anyway, so that's done. It's now I'll have a couple of mock-ups in my hands pretty soon, and we'll go from there. So it's really getting close. It's pretty exciting. So thanks for your patience, Patreon family. Thank you again. You've been looking after me for the last 7 or 8 months, and I really appreciate it. Now, before we go, don't forget, if you haven't subscribed, please do so. I'm sure everyone here's already subscribed. Hit the like, hit the little bell, and above all, share it with your friends. Just drop the link into a message on Facebook, wherever, and also in an email, and that'll make a big difference too. So one message that I wanted to pass on is in America right now, it's still probably late 19th of November. I'm guessing that. Probably right around midnight in some areas. So it's 3 and 7. Yeah, it's probably just the evening, early morning of the 20th. But the 19th of November, I'm just going to open this and show you. So this is the ebook version. Of course, we're not doing an ebook version. This is just for us to check. But if we go to here, this is the dedication page. And if I zoom in on that dedication page, you'll see Jacques Sandulescu, 1928 to 2010. Now, it was exactly 10 years ago, 10 years ago on the 19th of November, so 10 years ago in America today, that Jacques Sandulescu passed away. So it's been 10 years. So a little message to Annie Gottlieb. I first met Jacques and Annie in 1976 in Japan, and we remained good friends forever. And Annie was very helpful in getting me some great information about Jacques for this copy of the book. So I thought, in honor of Jacques, it's 10th anniversary since he passed away, that today I'm just going to concentrate on reading that section of the book. Now, I've probably read it before. In fact, I know I have, but it's so beautiful, and it's well worth reading again. You know, over the years, Jacques and Annie were so good to me over the years. I was just a young boy, and in 1980, I put a picture in the book. In fact, let me see if I could find it while I'm talking. I put a picture in the book going back to 1980. It's a really interesting story. And as you know, I'm always full of these interesting stories. But see, this page here has some great photos on it. And I'm going to zoom in on one particularly, that one there. And this is Annie down the front here, Annie Gottlieb. That's Jacques Zangelescu's lifelong partner. That's yours truly up the back there. Look, I had a beard then too. I was 21 then. And to my side is Nobuyuki Kishi-Shihan. That's Nobuyuki Kishi-Shihan. And this was in the Catskills in New York in 1980 at the camp that we had. Now, what had happened was I'd fought in the Australians in 1980. I got a second place. In my head, I won. How often does that happen? But anyway, and I was heading off to New York to train. I was going to go over and train for as long as I could, 6, 9 months, 12 months. But on the way over, I stopped in at LA, and I'd been practicing Raj Yoga or meditation yoga for just a few years at that point. I found out about Yogananda and his organization, SRF, Self-Realization Fellowship, in 1978, and fell in love with it. And this was a great opportunity for me. And when I was 21, I'd been saving up some money. I'd saved enough to live in LA, in America, for a year. Which isn't it interesting when you think about that? Other kids who are 21, they're too smart, they save, and by the time they're my age, they've got 5 houses and 4 cars and they're a multi-millionaire. But I just spend all my money all the time going in different places and experience things. But anyway, so I stopped in at LA on the way through, and I went to a class series and visited a couple of the sites. If you're in LA, you've got to go and visit the SRF Lake Shrine. This is I'll write this down for you. If you're ever in LA, you have to go to it. I've taken a number of people there, and I can tell you there isn't ever one person that I've ever taken there that doesn't walk away going, this was breathtaking. If I hadn't seen this, I would not have believed it existed. I once took a buddy there who's a 747 captain, and he's a former military pilot. In fact, he was one of 5 pilots who had solo command of an aircraft that carried nuclear warheads. So you can imagine the amount of responsibility that person carried. But anyway, I took him to the lake shrine, and at one stage there, I was looking at him, and he was just standing there. It's a beautiful spring-fed lake. It's the only spring-fed lake in Los Angeles. And he was standing there looking out over the lake, and he had a tear in his eye. No, she's not. That's correct, Mike. But he had a tear in his eye, and I smiled at him, and he said, I've been to a lot of places in the world. He said, but if I had not come here, I could not believe a place of such heavenly serenity existed on this earth. And that's in Los Angeles. Now, the thing is about it, the lake shrine actually enshrines the ashes of Mahatma Gandhi. Who would have ever thought, of all places in the world to find the ashes of Mahatma Gandhi? They're at Lake Shrine. And when he died, because Paramahansa Yogananda was his spiritual teacher, his guru, so he willed that half his ashes go to his family to be sprinkled on the Ganges River, as is the practice, and half the ashes go to Yogananda. And Yogananda took those ashes, and the Chinese government at that time, This is going back to 1950. They donated a 2,000-year-old stone sarcophagus to put the ashes in. So right there in Los Angeles, you've got this World Peace Memorial with the ashes of Mahatma Gandhi. Okay, so that's one of the places I went to on my way to New York to train. So naturally, by the time I got on the plane after a couple of weeks in LA, I just wanted to get back. I was kind of lucky I even kept karate up, because I fell in love with the yoga, the self-realization fellowship yoga, so much that I actually, for a long, long time, for many years, was contemplating becoming a monk and training to be a monk. But besides that, the point was I went to New York and I stayed as Uchideshi in Kishi Nobuyuki's dojo. And I was only there for a few weeks before I finally I returned to LA. And I stayed in LA for the year. Well, it wasn't quite a year. It was about 10 months. But I ended up staying in LA and focusing on the yoga. And so that's, another interesting part of history. But that's that great photo there of at the Catskill Mountains camp with Nobuyuki Kishi Shihan in 1980. And that's Annie down the front. She was a brown belt then. She's obviously a black belt now. But that Annie, I met Annie and Jacques. I'm just going to zoom ahead to this page again. I met Annie and Jacques in 1976 and found some beautiful letters going backwards and forwards over the years. I was very blessed in 1976 to have. That was my first interpreting job for Masoyama, was the 8th All Japan. I think now they're up to like the 50th. Yes, that's correct. It was a very early on in the piece. So it was only just the changeover. So it was still very much trying to find its find respect in the world's political scale of spheres, if you like, Tigray. But anyway, I met so many wonderful people on that first opportunity. Became Shihan Bobby Lowe, for example. I have a wonderful correspondence going back to 1976. We became very close then, if I may be so bold as to say. Of course, he was a Shihan, so I was very respectful at distance. But there are other people like Oyama Shigeru, Oyama Yasuhiko, Miyuki Miura, Peter Chong, Shihan from Singapore, Luke Hollander, Antonio Pinheiro, all these big names that I had the opportunity to translate for. You're a good question, Tigray, but I think, Yogananda had a very, very powerfully pacifying influence over people. And so, no one would even get angry in front of him, let alone contemplate world war. But anyway, so I thought what I'm going to do briefly here is read this section on Jacques. Now, the good news about the book is, like I said, it's at the printers. But the other good news is, even as I'm talking right now, in the background behind on my computer, my daughter and Nico Reyes, who is a student of Shihan Stephen Fu in Philippines, and they are collaborating to get the website ready for the book orders. I had no idea how difficult it was to set the website up, because mainly the big problem is postage rates, delivery rates. What do you do? If I had one central source, like if I just said, no, don't worry about it, I'll post everything out from Australia. Well, you're looking at $40, $50 a copy, $60, $70 in some places, $80 US in some places to mail the book out from Australia. So it makes it prohibitive. So what's happened is I've been very fortunate to link up with some good people. Frederick's one of them in Sweden. I have my niece in California looking after North America. I'm looking after Australia and parts of Asia. Frederick is looking after Scandinavia and parts of Europe, and I have one other friend in the UK who's going to be looking after the UK and other parts of Europe. And what we've done is we've sourced the different delivery costs from each of those areas and keyed in the cheapest one. And that's been very time consuming. But then what we did with that then is now we're getting the website ready, and I'm happy to say that the goal is the website and book pre-orders will be available from tomorrow. So that's a good thing. That's probably 24 hours or 20 hours from now. Tomorrow, Saturday, Australian time, the website will go live. You can go there now, but I prefer if you didn't, simply because it's just not ready. So it can be confusing, and you could press a button and it'll cost you $5,000, which you'll never get back, because I'll move to the Bahamas with my wife and my children. Yes, Torbjörn, exactly. That's true. So you can do that by all means, Torbjörn. I don't know how far it is, but if you can do it in a day and come back, by all means do it. And if you think you will do that, Torbjörn, please contact me, because the amount of books that I'm sending to these different places hasn't been set yet. But if I know, for example, Torbjörn, that I'm going to get 100 orders in Norway, and I really think that probably, I imagine between Kvinesdal, Bergen, Tromsø, and Lureskog, fast car. I'm sure I'll probably get at least 100 orders or so. So it's a fair call to say that I may get that many orders. So if you think that's the best way to do it, then by all means. I mean, I know you're only joking and I'm only joking, but there's a true word in that jest as well. So it could work out to be the best way to do it. The biggest problem is the delivery costs. That's all. Was Mike? Glad you made it. Was Frederick and Torbjörn. Yeah, so you guys can work that out. And by the time the books are ready, I'll know, and I'll be able to determine how many books I can send off to Frederick. Okay, so I'm just going to read this section from Jacques, because it's a very beautiful section. So this section is about Jacques Sandulescu, who, as I mentioned, if you came late, the book is set at US $69.95. And in Australia, I think the postage is going to be about $12 or $15 Aussie. But that's roughly the price. And also Patreon family members, you'll be getting a letter in the next, before Sunday anyway. So by tomorrow night or Sunday, Patreon family members, you'll be getting a message, and in that you'll be getting a special discount code exclusively for Patreon family members to get a discount on the book as well. So this section from the book, Jacques Sandulescu. The resilience of a soul determined to endure, no matter how dark the circumstances, during and against all odds escape through a frozen Ukrainian winter in the aftermath of World War II, is the theme of the book Donbass. Jacques Sandulescu's autobiographical account of his escape from a prison labor camp as an 18-year-old is an extraordinary portrayal of the spirit of US at its most extreme. Few could have survived, very few. In the martial arts, we tend to make comparisons based on fighting skill. The human side of those we train and sweat with is easily overlooked. We know a lot about Masayama's trials, and it is the inspiration of his life that has encouraged millions to find their own dormant strengths. Yet there are others in Kyokushin whose own life journey is no less inspiring, who played an important, albeit lesser known role in the forging of Masayama himself. The Soviets invaded Romania in 1944. In January 1945, 16-year-old Vanya, Jacques Sandulescu, was on his way to school a tall, strong lad, easily mistaken for an adult. He was arrested, transported to the coal mines of the Donbass region of Ukraine, 1,300 kilometers to the east. For 2 years, Vanya labored in harsh and dangerous conditions, the youngest prisoner in the camp. One day, when he was working in the deep and hazardous Mine 28, his friend Omar sensed danger and shouted urgently. It all happened in an instant. Vanya was knocked unconscious as the mine collapsed around him. His legs were trapped, but miraculously he could breathe. It was as good as hopeless, but no one, especially Omar, would let the gentle giant Vanya's life end this way. 4 frantic hours of non-stop digging later, Omar pulled Vanya out, feet first. Vanya was hospitalized, but the prognosis was not good. He overheard a doctor discussing the need to amputate both legs. What? No, no. He had to escape, limbs intact. 2 nights later, Vanya wrapped his horribly damaged legs in torn bed sheets and wire, put on his labor clothes and one of those wool-lined Russian caps, and, heart racing, walked lamely out of the hospital. It was a frozen midwinter night, the chill biting deeply, the guards absent, mindful only of their own need for warmth. Head down, Vanya shuffled to the mine's train station and buried himself in the coal of one of the open cars. He knew the train was heading west, transporting coal to the Soviet-controlled countries of Eastern Europe. Anywhere in that direction would take him closer to West Germany and further away from amputation. As much as his heart pulled him towards his family in Soviet-occupied Romania, he knew it would be suicide as an escapee to return. Sandulescu's Donbass describes the inconceivable austerity of his escape, hobbling painfully from train to train, burying his damaged body in frozen coal, driven by an unbreakable will to survive. Vanya's ordeal took him west across Ukraine, then northwest to Poland. From there, he crossed into Germany, first to the Soviet sector in the east, then finally to freedom in West Germany. Donbass also describes the beautiful elemental selflessness of the human heart as strangers at every step of his journey gave what they could to the cold, lonely, courageous young man. A piece of bread, shelter for a few hours or a night, a few coins they were keeping for cigarettes, always jeopardizing their own safety in doing so without a second thought. Vanya remained in Europe for a few years, surviving by trading and transporting contraband on the black market. His dream was always America. Finally, in 1949, the opportunity arose to migrate to Canada. For a while, he worked on a logging road in the wilds of Ontario. In Montreal, he made a life prize fighting. The baby-faced killer, as Vanya was known, was taken to Chicago by an American promoter. 19 fights and 16 wins, 15 by knockout. Later, his career was interrupted when he was drafted, sent to Europe once again, this time as part of the US military. After his service, Vanya remained in France, studying literature and philosophy at the Sorbonne. Serving in the military entitled him to US citizenship. When he returned from Europe, he headed to the Big Apple. He never left. Isn't that an amazing story? This 18-year-old kid has been left for dead. His best buddy digs him out by hand, drags him out by his feet. His legs are crushed to the point they have to amputate them. He overhears this, so he wraps his legs in sheets and wire, puts his dirty clothes on, and casually walks to the train station and buries himself in the open coal cart. And this is in the middle of a Ukraine winter. And it's just breathtaking. And then all the way, the book is beautiful. It's called Donbass. And all the way, he talks about the kindness of the people and how yes, Tiberiu. I'd love to hear that. Indeed. So you understand the conditions he was in. And then he gets to Germany, he survives, makes it to America, pro boxer, ends up getting back to Europe with the military, and then studies literature at the Sorbonne. This is why Jacques spoke about 6 languages. He's quite a man, and this is a professional boxer as well. When Oyama arrived in a cold New York in 1960, he was alone. He spoke no English. He was uncertain, way out of his comfort zone. Vanya had been in that position, knew what a gift it was when a stranger offered help for no reason beyond the kindness of the heart. And Vanya definitely knew a thing or two about cold winters, hunger, and loneliness. They forged a strong friendship that lasted a lifetime. They were fighters with that unspoken fighter's conviction, the cool, gentle nod reserved for other fighters. They had both survived and thrived in hostile environments. They got each other. Their friendship was a lot deeper than most who knew them realized, especially in the later years. Vanya, Big Jacques to his friend Masayama, Big Jacques. That's what, Masayama used to say. Oh, Big Jacques. Hey, Patty, didn't see you there. Oh, Big Jacques. Give him a hug and a kiss. Jacques used to kiss people, and he even used to kiss Masayama. Not many people got away with that, I tell you. To his friend, was one of the true treasures of Kyokushin, with a heart that knew no boundaries and an embrace that warmed the world. Who loves your baby? That was his catchphrase. Here are Jacques Sandelescu's own words about his relationship with Masayama from a prologue to his book, Donbass. Donbass was released in Japanese, and he wrote this prologue to introduce to the Japanese audience his relationship to Masayama. My friendship with Masayama. When I met Masayama, an empty place in my life was filled. I had once had another friend I thought must be the strongest man in the world. His name was Omar, and when we were prisoners slaving together in the coal mines of the Soviet Union, he had saved my life. That was in 1947 when I was 18 and Omar was 19. By 1960, when Kancho would come into my life, I was a successful businessman, the owner of 2 thriving coffee houses in New York's bohemian Greenwich Village, Cafe Flamenco and El Gitano, the Gypsy, featuring folk music and authentic Spanish flamenco. Like any strong personality, I was surrounded by well-wishers and ill-wishers, rivals and hangers-on, and even a few good friends, but no one filled the space left by Omar. He had been as close as a brother and more than my equal, and I did not know whether he was dead or alive. No one ever thinks of the strong as lonely. What I could never show or express, flamenco held out for me. I loved its basic, primitive quality. It came from deep in the belly, usually a hungry belly, since the gypsies who created it had nothing but their passions. One of my friends was an eccentric flamenco guitarist named Agostino de Mello. One night in my coffee house, Agostino could not stop raving about his new discovery, karate. Look at this, he said, and he showed me a book titled What is Karate? On the cover, a man was defeating a charging bull with his bare hands. That man had written the book, Agostino told me. His name was Masatatsu Oyama. Did I want to borrow the book? Agostino asked. Having been a boxer by profession and a street fighter by necessity, of course I was interested in a book on fighting technique. But when I got home, I discovered that it was much, much more. You couldn't just write a book like that. You had to live it. This was a book I had to own. I went right out and bought a copy for myself. I still have it. And you may recall, I can show you again if you like, but you may recall last time I read this, that book that Jacques went out and bought. He bought a copy for himself and he said, I still have it. That was very lovingly gifted to me by Annie Gottlieb after Jacques passed away. And I now treasure it. I've I treasure it very carefully because I don't consider it to be mine. I consider it to be a responsibility to care for it for the next generation. Then I'll pass it on to someone that I think has the wherewithal and the courage and the love for Kyokushin to treasure it and care for it for another generation. And it's beautifully inscribed to Jacques from Soulside too. If I recall, I'll pull it out once again before the end. As amazed as I was by Mr. Oyama's feats of physical power, control, and speed, superhuman strength was not entirely new to me. I came from a part of the world that just naturally produced very strong men. During World War I, my own father and a fellow soldier had lifted and moved an iron cannon weighing over 600 kilograms. In Russia, as skinny and starved as I was, I could lift and carry over 200 kilograms, and as you will see, Omar was much stronger than me. After the war, I had seen a refugee from Yugoslavia crush a raw potato in his fist, the watery pulp oozing out between his fingers. So breaking bricks and stones barehanded was something I could imagine and indeed would soon do. But human nature is much harder to break. What impressed me most of all was the long time Masoyama had spent alone in the mountains, training. I knew of solitude. I knew the tremendous determination that took. I had decided to escape from Russia alone under conditions a rational person would call impossible. Once I started, I had no choice but to go on or die. The several weeks it took me to reach freedom seemed like an eternity. Yet Mr. Oyama had deliberately isolated himself from society for 15 months, subjecting himself to severe hardships and deprivation in order to become strong. That a human being would do that voluntarily and have the willpower to stick with it was awesome to me. And now Augustino told me this man was coming to New York. Now his book had been translated into English, and my friend Augustino was one of the Americans who had written to him in response. Mr. Oyama had answered his letter, saying that he was planning another trip to the States. Augustino asked me if I would like to come with him and meet Mr. Oyama. I must have gaped at him with my mouth open. Would I like to? How could he ask such a question? There was only one answer: when and where. The day arrived. We were to meet Masoyama at the New Yorker Hotel, right near the famous fight venue, Madison Square Garden, on a Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock. In our eagerness, we arrived 10 minutes early. The moment we walked into the lobby, I saw him. He was wearing dark glasses, but the aura around him was so magnetic, I just knew it was him. He recognized us too. He took his sunglasses off and reached out his hand. I shook it. It was heavy as a rock. There was that broad, strong, hard, kind face, very handsome, and shining black eyes that seemed to pierce to the truth of the person in front of him. He was not very tall, but broad and solid, and he exuded power. The strange thing was that though we could hardly speak to each other, we understood each other right away. Augustino, who was not a fighter, but more of an intellectual, sort of faded into the background. That first day, I took Concho to Chinatown to eat. It would become our daily habit. After one night in the hotel, he came to stay with me, except for occasional visits to Brooklyn, where he had a student who had served in the US military in Japan. Concho would sleep on my couch for most of the 6 or 7 months he stayed in the US. I had been starving for such company. Of course, I wanted to train with him, to learn from him, but I did not know how to ask. Concho solved the problem for me within 2 to 3 days of his arrival. I had found us an interpreter, a Japanese college student named Yoshi, which is my son's name, by the way, who was fluent in English and agreed to join us for a few hours every afternoon so we could talk. I will never forget, we were sitting in a Chinese restaurant the first time Yoshi joined us. Concho looked at me, and the very first question he asked was, "Where can we train?" An hour later, I had begun my first training session with the foremost karate authority in the world. We were in a nice clean gym 10 minutes from my apartment, which we called the dojo from then on. As that first training progressed, I saw sweat break out on Kancho's face and pleasure. To my great relief, he seemed satisfied with his new student, me, even though the movements felt awkward to me, so different from boxing. The dogi had long pants, and I was not used to that. At first, it felt like it got in my way. Before long, I would feel naked without it. Our first few workouts were 2 hours long, but soon they stretched out to 3 hours, then 4. After 2 weeks, we were training non-stop 5 to 6 hours a day. It was a regimen of endless repetitions, for Kancho's belief was in repetition lies strength. But it was far from mere repetition. In each punch, each kick, you put everything you could. It reminded me of escaping from Russia, with one major difference. Kancho and I could go to Chinatown afterwards and fill ourselves with good food. But there was a similarity when you are totally exhausted and you feel you can't go on. That's when you reach down deep into yourself for more. You concentrate totally on each punch, each step, and then one more, and then one more, and then one more. Running for your life is not the same as choosing to train to your limits and beyond. But I understood that Kancho's lonely training had honed the same kind of determination that had kept me alive. Of course, I knew more about Kancho from reading his book than he knew about me. I had showed him the scars on my legs, but I couldn't explain how I had gotten them. Even when our interpreter Yoshi was there, about such things one does not speak much. Kancho, too, had written of his mountain training in a few simple words, but if you had an imagination, they spoke volumes. Very few people knew that I had also written the story of my 2 years as a prisoner in Russia and my escape, the story you are about to read. Remember, this was in the prologue to the Japanese version of Donbass. If you can get your hands on that Donbass, it's a great read. You can get it on ebook too, on Kindle. I would have liked to give Kancho this book to speak for me, but my story was then just a manuscript. It was not yet published. And even if it had been, of course, Kancho couldn't read English. Still, by training together, we understood each other better than words. I remember moving forward 5 steps, a punch with each step, then turning 5 steps back, forward, punch and kiai, turn, step, and punch back, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I got blisters on the balls of my feet, and they broke and the water came out. I showed them to Kancho, and he just smiled and rumbled, "Good." Sometimes he would say, "Today, special day. Today, special day." And then we would repeat just one technique, such as Jordan ski, for 45 minutes. Kancho would fall into a rhythm like a machine, a tireless, unstoppable machine. Afterwards, out of breath, I asked him how many, and he wrote on a blackboard at the back of the dojo, 5,000. I had always felt strong, but training with him, I felt stronger and stronger. And I could feel the hard training welding the new friendship closer and tighter. When we finished training, we would go to my apartment and shower. In the evening, our translator Yoshi joined us in Chinatown, and we ate together and talked. Little by little, Kancho was learning English. In later years, he would always have a translator present when a foreign branch chief or dignitary talked to him. Unknown to the visitor, however, Kancho understood most of what was said in English, and while it was being translated into Japanese, he was already crafting his reply. He was surprised that I knew how to eat with chopsticks, and I told him that when I was training as a fighter in Montreal, I had lived with a Chinese restaurateur named Harry Fong, paying for my room and board by washing dishes. Us, good morning. That little story that Jacques mentions there about Solsai understanding English. He understood a fair bit. And I recall numerous times over the years when I'd be interpreting for Solsai, and he would say something in Japanese and I would translate it in English. And the person he was having a discussion with would say something in English and I would reply, and he already understood, but I'd reply in Japanese, and then he would respond in English straight back without waiting for me. I'd finish, and then he wouldn't wait for me to translate. He'd respond straight back. And quite a few times it was quite amusing because I'm going from English to Japanese to English to Japanese. Then instead of Japanese, he goes English. So I would translate it to the English-speaking guy in Japanese, and everyone would burst into laughter. It was so funny. It happened quite often. When we finished training, we would go to I read that. One evening, a folk singer was performing in my coffee house, and Kancho asked for his guitar. To my surprise, he started playing and singing with great sensitivity, a strong, sad song. Through Yoshi, Kancho later explained to me that it was the tale of a Korean farmer, his never-ending work in the fields and his family. I stared at Kancho's hands. What strength they had, yet how finely they handled the guitar. I wondered what other surprises he had in store for me. And that's it. That's a beautiful tribute to Solsai from his good friend Jacques Sandulescu. And yeah, I'm sure it's interesting when you translate. And as I said, today in America, the 19th of November, is exactly 10 years since the passing of Jacques Sandulescu. So I just thought I'd read that today as a little tribute to Big Jacques, as Solsai called him, Big Jacques. Give me 1 sec. I'll go and get that book and I'll show you the inscription from Solsai. So Jacques mentioned that book. As soon as he could, he went out and bought his own copy. And this is the copy that he bought. I'm just trying to get it so the light doesn't flicker. And this is the copy that he bought. And if you have a look on the very opening page, to my best friend, Mr. Jacques, 1962, 10-1 from Masoyama. And the Japanese down the bottom says Zo, Jacques Sandulescu sama, Kei Song. Those kanji there are very unique kanji. That's what you write when you're the author of a book and you give a copy to someone. That's the kanji that you write to present it to them. And Oyama Masatatsu, and that says, and you can date Masayama's signatures from what he writes. And this row of kanji down here was actually before Kyokushin, the worldwide organization Kyokushin existed. So it became Kokusai Karate Do Kyokushin Kaikan, or the International Karate Organization Kyokushin Kaikan. But at this point, it was Nippon Karate Do, or All Japan Karate Organization Kyokushin. And there's his signature that says karate, and that's his famous Ko. It's called Ko. The kanji that he writes. So lovely piece of history, which I treasure and I take great care of and responsibility for. It stays wrapped up very carefully. So, Jacques Sandulescu, rest in peace. He was one of the great gems of Kyokushin, one of the genuine gems, genuine personalities of Kyokushin. And today is 10 years since he passed away. Yeah, they have a lot, Marco. And boy, oh boy, some of the stories Jacques talks about, he used to talk about when they get into fights because, you're talking about the 60s in New York. It was a tough time. And Jacques ran a couple of jazz bars. So you know, they used to get up to a lot of mischief back then. Anyone who worked doors, uh, even in my era, in the late 70s, early 90s, it was a different world. These days, you all have CCTV and IDs, and it's all politically correct. But in those days, you just dealt with things a little differently. Well, then, if you go back another 15 years or 20 years to the early 60s, you can imagine what New York was like. And Jacques used to tell some funny stories because he was a big, strong man, 6'5", 6'6", ex-boxer. He knew how he'd shape up. And Masayama was 5'9.5", 5'9.5" at the most, so they get into fights and they end up out of the back alley next to his cafe, and they look at Jacques and they look at Masayama and they think, well, they'll sort out this little Japanese guy. And Jacques said it was horrible sometimes, the damage that he could do to people. And he said he stopped punching people. He would palm heal them because he was just so afraid of hurting people, Are you talking about Masayama? Tigray? Oh, yeah, good point, Mike. I can remember. This is the crazy thing, Mike. Mike Lorden just said Jacques had a few roles in TV shows. Yeah, he was an extra in quite a few movies. And when I got back from living in Japan for that first year, I moved to a northern town called Townsville, way up north of Australia. I got work there. I was a customs officer, actually, and Townsville was kind of remote for customs officers. Anyway, great time in my life. But I remember one weekend I've just gone to see a movie, and I'm sitting in the cinema, just sitting back watching a movie, and then there's Jacques. And you can imagine, like, that week I'd just written another letter and received another letter from Jacques. It was pre-internet, so we used to correspond in handwriting. And I'm sitting in the theater and I'm by myself, and there's Jacques. And I was like, what do you do? This is like amazing. I think it was, it might have been too early for Trading Places. It might have been Trading Places. He was in Trading Places. But anyway, I'm in the theater and I'm like, could you imagine? I mean, it's, when you don't know actors, famous actors, and you look up at the screen and there's the central figure of the central scene that's being shot is the bloke that you just received a letter from and wrote a letter from the day before. And I'm going, Jacques, and you kind of, one side of you wants to let everyone in the theatre know that he's your friend. And the other side's going, don't be such an idiot, and it was just like, and it was just so funny, but he was in quite a few movies. And I think Trading Places was a funny one because he ad-libbed in that. And they kept it in. They liked the way he ad-libbed. But anyway, good reminder, Mike Lorden. Thanks. He was not just TV shows, but some good movies. Tigray, did Sorsai get challenged? Well, who knows what happened on the streets of New York when he was a young man. But I know Sorsai introduced me to a man once, which I've mentioned in my book as well, Takeda Shokan Sensei, who's now a 9th Dan or a 10th Dan, was actually a contemporary of Sonei Chu. And Sorsai introduced me to him. That's right. They lived on 4th Street. I stayed in that apartment for many times, Mike Lorden. You're correct there. That's correct. But Sorsai, when he introduced me to Takeda Sensei, he goes, and he says, I've been challenged in magazines, in newspapers, on TV, on the radio, on the telephone. He said, but only one man ever walked up to me face to face and said, you and me right now. And he said, this is Takeda Sensei. And Takeda Sensei goes, oh, no, in Japanese. Oh, no, please don't ever mention that. That was the behavior of a rash young man. And a number of years after that, Takeda Sensei was on the Gold Coast. We went out to dinner. And I said to him, when you challenged Sorsai, what chance did you give yourself? And he said, you have to realize, his actual words were, if the average person can see 3 years ahead, Masayama can see 30 years ahead. He said people had no comprehension of the man's greatness. And when it comes to fighting, people people think it's all talk and no action, because he fights bulls and he fights, breaks bricks. But people didn't realize how incredibly powerful his mind was. And anyone who ever met him, even Nick Pettis, I think he mentioned, when you meet him, the first thing he does, he looks at you, and you hear stories about people with a powerful gaze. But I can tell you that anyone who meets him, the first thing that happens is their whole body goes to water, and then he would bring you out of it again if you're a good person. But anyway, I said to Takeda Sensei, when you challenge Masayama, what chance did you give yourself? He said, well, you're not talking about a normal human being here. You're talking about a superhuman, a Superman. He said, this is why it makes perfect sense that they called him God Hand. You have to understand that this guy was on another level. He said, at the instant I challenged him, it was 50-50. He said, I gave myself 50-50. He said, 10 seconds later, it was 90-10, and 15 seconds later, it was 100-0. And I thought, and he laughed. He said, what was I thinking? Because he just said the way Masayama dealt with it psychologically, emotionally, physically, spiritually, it just completely. And this is Takeda Sensei, he was a well-known, hard, tough man. He's the one that took attention away from judo and put it on karate back in the 50s. Another story. So there you have a beautiful, beautiful person, Jacques, and lovely man. He used to give you a kiss. He'd hug you and kiss you. And I remember when Gary O'Neill was fighting in the 6 World Tournament, and he just won another fight. And Gary, my baby, and he'd give him a hug and he'd go, punch him in the mouth, like this, He was so funny. But anyway, that's Jacques. And today I honor Jacques, 10 years since he passed away. Annie Gottlieb, if you get a chance to see this, which maybe you will one day, my love to you, and everyone sends their love, and we all think about you, and you're as much an important gem in the crown of Kyokushin as anyone. So it was a great honor for me to have hooked up with Jacques and Annie in 1976, and bless his soul. So anyway, folks, Jacques Angelescu, Patreon, I love you all. Thank you for your support. You'll be hearing from me soon to get a discount code for the book, so don't go online and book one yet. The website is something like that. That's the website. Off to Tassie. Oh, you're going to go visit friends? Yeah, good on you, Mike. Mike used to live in Tassie before he moved to. But can you get away? I thought Western Australia was in lockdown. Maybe that's why you're clearing out. Urs Torbjörn. Thanks, Mike Lorden. Look, that's the Bedbudo Karate. Book orders will be going live tomorrow. So give it 24 hours. Restrain yourself, because you can go now and book, but it could end up that there's a mistake made and we'll have to sort something out. So thanks for coming along. I'm off to training now. Not hard at my age. I just go to training and just enjoy rather than try and smash. Appreciate you coming along, everybody, and I look forward to seeing you on Monday. Us. The link does work, yes. Us, mon ami Francis, merci beaucoup. Oui, merci. Good, everybody. Yeah, the link does work, so you can go along with, but it's being worked at the moment. So that when my daughter and Nico and Benji, they're all working together to put it together. So what you see now will be different in an hour, and then different in the morning. Us, Rochelle, you're quiet. I'm glad you came along. I've got to catch up with you too soon. But anyway, everybody, thank you very much for joining in. Us.